Hello again, Gooners! It's the Loose Cannon number 47, and you may have noticed a bit of paperwork in the background. That paperwork, which is over there, is ESP Soccer, ESP Football. It's a website I'm working on. So a bit of promotion for them, or me. And a red card for me, before I get started. A red card. Why am I giving myself a red card? Because I keep forgetting to use my cards. So now I've used it for this time. Right, what have we got for you this time? We've got a quiz question. I'll throw that your way right this moment because coming up later, an extract, and I hope I don't lose my mark in the book, from this huge history book, The Official History of Arsenal. Phil Saw and Martin Tyler wrote it. Anyway, I'm going to be reading from it. And when I read from it, we'll answer this question. Who was the Yugoslav manager who was allegedly approached to be the successor to Bertie Mee as Arsenal boss? So it's a 1970s kind of question. Who was that Yugoslav manager? He didn't manage Yugoslavia at the time. He was managing a club team. But who was it that was allegedly approached by Arsenal to succeed Bertie Mee when Bertie Mee handed in a shock resignation? Right. Apart from that, it's all about transfer news, really. And the following names are going to come up. Santi Cazorla, clearly, Ganso, Isco, Salomon Rondon, Robin van Persie, inevitably, Kevin Mirallas, Hugo Lloris, and Andrey Arshavin, Luke Shaw, Gregory van der Wiel, and that's about it. So before I do that, though, I want to mention Gary Mackay-Stephen of Dundee United, a very talented young winger. Not sure why Stuart Pearce didn't notice him. He's only 21. Surely, if he could do serious damage to SPL teams, which he did last season apparently, and certainly did today when playing for Dundee United against Hibs, surely he could have done damage against a team like South Korea with our very own Chu Young Park. So I want to congratulate him. I'm not going to get out my Wookiee book this time for him, but I want to congratulate him for making the semi-finals. And hopefully he'll do well and get himself a transfer. Yes. Well, one player who didn't do well but still managed to get himself a transfer, albeit a free transfer, was Manuel Almunia. And he certainly made me laugh today, and I've got to thank him for that. He reckoned he thought he was going to win cups when he joined Arsenal. Well, it's not really that funny, I suppose, when you think about it. But coming from him, it seemed funny. He said all the top players left, and I thought, well, not you though, Manuel, not you. You wasn't ever a top player. He was all right, though. He was all right on his day, but he had a lot of bad days, and his good days weren't amazing. They were all right. And so, Manuel, you're not the worst goalkeeper I've ever seen, not by a long shot. Lucas Fabianski, that could possibly be another story. But anyway, Almunia, so you notice I'll kind of try to get over that one pretty quickly before I start getting problems over criticising certain players too much. Sorry about that. But it's just my opinion. Doesn't mean much, but it's my opinion, and I'm holding on to it for now. I'm always willing to change when players prove me wrong. Anyway, Almunia, he said, it's fantastic that we've signed Santi Cazorla. Thanks for letting the cat out of the bag, Manuel. But not just him. It's been on the FIFA website. It's been announced on Twitter, I think, by Julio Baptista, Enzo Maresca. Just about everybody knows he's going to be on the plane to Cologne, but it's not on Arsenal yet, not on the official Arsenal website, which is kind of wrong. I feel it's wrong. And another player who, well, it keeps going quiet, doesn't it? I didn't even mention Nuri Sahin on my list of players with transfer speculation concerning Arsenal, because there's been so much speculation, but it's been so quiet. Everybody's just saying the same thing. Yes, he could go on loan, and yes, his destiny's in his own hands, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. Ganso is kind of similar on that front. I think it's just not going to happen. The Santos president, Luis Alvaro de Oliveira Ribeiro, says nothing less than a buyout clause being met will force their hand into selling the player who has come out and said that he's contracted till 2015, and that's all he knows about it. But going back to Santi Cazorla for a moment, of course, Malaga, busy selling players. Salomon Rondon has now officially left the club, joining Rubin Kazan on a 4-year deal. He's been linked with us as well. Isco, I think, might have been linked with us. He's a Spanish under-21 winger. Looks like he'll go to Manchester United. If we're looking for a winger, perhaps we might want to raid Malaga again, but Santi Cazorla seems like he can play everywhere except for goal. Mattison and Apono are also available from Malaga, and well, with their current financial plight, it would be very wise of any club looking for players to look that way. Meanwhile, we all want to look away, of course, when we hear the name Robin van Persie at the moment. Will he stay or will he go? Well, it looks like Manchester United will do a deal for £20 million. That's the latest. I haven't had any real inside news on it, but it sounds like he's gonna go there. Roberto Mancini of Manchester City said, "I don't think he will come here." That doesn't necessarily mean he won't. Definitely won't. But it just Mancini giving his view there. But one player who could come to us is Kevin Mirallas. He's a Belgian international, 24-year-old striker, currently with Olympiacos. He will cost us £6.4 million if we can meet his release clause, which of course we can, but do we want to buy another striker? Possibly, if we're losing Robin van Persie, you might say. Do we want to buy another goalkeeper? I'd say yes to that question. As you well know, nothing against Szczesny, but I think you need somebody pushing him all the way. Hugo Lloris, although he didn't have a very good Euro 2012, could be that man. But he's going to cost £12 million. Apparently Spurs are prepared to pay it as soon as Luka Modric joins Real Madrid, if indeed that deal goes through. Well, obviously, I would like a goalkeeper, but one player I wouldn't like to see leave us is Andrey Arshavin. Queen's Park Rangers apparently trying to set up a loan deal with a view to making that deal permanent. There's been talk about him being out of contract next year. I don't think so. I think he will be in contract until 2014 probably, but I'm not sure about that. But there's not been an awful lot said on it, so check it out for yourselves. I might be making a mistake there. Well, meanwhile, Luke Shaw has been linked with a move to us. We're going to have to pay in excess of £4 million for this 17-year-old player, because that's how much Chelsea bid, and it was turned down by Southampton. Of course, Southampton apparently sniffing around Theo Walcott, we heard. Well, let's get Luke Shaw if we're going to let Theo go. Not really, Theo. I'd never let you go to Southampton, me personally. But if we want to bring in a good defender, a good right back, we could do worse and sign Gregory van der Wiel, according to some people. I'm not so sure myself, because he had a lousy Euro 2012, made a terrible mistake, of course, and he also made a mistake off the field in the not too distant past when he posed with Lil Wayne and put the picture on Twitter when he was called up for the Holland squad, but said he couldn't make it because he was concussed. But next minute he's at a rap concert. So make up your mind on that one. But I think Arsene Wenger will make up his mind that he doesn't want to buy that kind of player. That's my guess. And anyway, £7 million will do the trick, but I think Newcastle are most likely to cough up that kind of fee for the Ajax right back. Anyway, I think that's it. I think I've just about covered everything there. That was pretty quick. But this bit won't be so quick, so if you don't like the Jackanory section, stroke quiz section, I suggest you switch off now and go and do something kind of interesting and more useful. And call up your accountant or something. Give yourself a shock. Because this is also shocking stuff, though, because I'm going to give you the answer to that question that I posed earlier about who was the Yugoslav manager that we approached after the shocking resignation of Bertie Mee. So I'm going to read from this book by, who was it, Phil Saw and Martin Tyler. Anyway, the last thing I read to you last time was about Alex Cropley signing and having a frustrating time. So we were in a kind of tailspin at the time, you might say. Anyway, I will read from this point. Arsenal's form was still erratic, but a promising FA Cup run lifted morale as the club moved into 1975. But not before York City, struggling in the second division at the time, came to Highbury in the third round and fully deserved a 1-1 draw. I've got a feeling I was at that game. It needed a hat-trick from Brian Kidd and extra time to ease the Gunners through a difficult replay. Life became hard again in the fourth round, and George Armstrong's first goals in 21 months arrived judiciously to put Coventry City out in a replay at Highbury. Fingernails were down to the quick before John Radford edged the Gunners into the quarterfinals in a second replay with Leicester. But the celebrations were somewhat muted by the controversial match at Derby County 2 days earlier, which had plunged the club into turmoil. Both Alan Ball and the equally experienced Bob McNabb had been sent off for dissent in the 2-1 defeat. It was only the second time since the war that two players from the same side had been sent off in the First Division, and the first had been Frank McClintock and Peter Storey in 1967. Trust us to have both records. Alan Ball and Bob McNabb felt they had fallen victim of the overzealous referee John Yates and wanted the club to back appeals which would allow them to play in the Cup quarter-final against West Ham. They were disappointed, owing to Arsenal's strong sense of responsibility. Towing the line, eh? At this time, there was much consternation within football that clubs were taking advantage of the appeal procedure to make key players available for big games. After long deliberation, Arsenal decided not to back their senior players, and it was a decision which represented the beginning of the end of an uneasy relationship between Arsenal and the volatile and outspoken Alan Ball. And this is what he said, probably even a very high-pitched voice. "Arsenal and I can never be the same," he was quoted as saying. Both he and Bob McNabb pressed on with appeals and played in the vital cup game, but a young lad called Alan Taylor, destined to score twice in the quarter-final, semi-final and final, enabled the eventual 1975 FA Cup winners to become the first London club ever to beat Arsenal at home in the FA Cup. And unfortunately, I was there to witness it. It was pouring with rain. There was still a sting in the tail. Alan Ball and Bob McNabb lost their appeals and were banned for 3 games. When the dust had settled, the club still had to face the possibility of the unthinkable, relegation. Yet, even though the teams were depressed and unhappy, feeling that Mee was becoming more and more remote and that Bobby Campbell had no more to offer as a coach, they pulled themselves up from their bootstraps to beat the drop. In fact, they finished a respectable 16th position. We would hardly call that respectable nowadays, but they didn't win too many friends in the process. Sheffield United manager Ken Furphy said after a 1-0 defeat at Highbury, "I never thought I would see the day when Arsenal players fought among themselves, pulled shirts, wasted time and so freely indulged in foul tactics. Desperate measures for desperate times." Elsewhere, an old friend had lost the fight. West Brom, who never had the personnel to exploit Don Howe's tactical genius, had gone down the previous season, and when they had failed to get back, Howe's contract was not renewed. His erstwhile senior partner at Arsenal had only a season left in charge himself, and since the breakup of their famous partnership 4 years earlier, both, it seemed, had lost a large measure of effectiveness. I hope that doesn't happen with Pat Rice and Arsene Wenger. I don't think it will somehow. The Bertie Mee era was drawing to a close, but not before the manager, board, players and fans seemed close to an internal war, and the club was at its lowest ebb since the dog days of Billy Wright's reign exactly 10 years before. 2 major personalities from the double side departed in the summer. Bob McNabb had enhanced the long tradition of fine Arsenal fullbacks with his pace, astute tackling and reading of the game. This happy character also acted as an able lieutenant to Frank McClintock during the double year. He was rewarded with a free transfer to Wolves. Charlie George finally got his wish to leave, and such was his disillusionment that he even seemed destined to sign for Terry Neill, then manager at Tottenham. Spurs had planned a press conference to announce their coup, but overnight Charlie George was tempted by a counter-offer from Dave Mackay to join champions Derby County for £90,000. Of course, Dave Mackay also played for Spurs, but I don't actually remember that very clearly. I can't imagine Charlie George playing for Spurs. Just can't imagine it. That he never fulfilled his world-class potential that he clearly possessed was exasperating to all who worked and played with him at Highbury. Don Howe told him, after seeing his virtuoso performances as a teenager, that he could become the Di Stefano of English football. But he was never to achieve a level of consistency to command a regular place in the First Division, never mind be compared with the maestro of Madrid. When Alan Ball arrived, the darling of the North Bank felt his nose pushed out of joint, and the glimpses of greatness which had inspired Don Howe to such a lofty comparison became rarer and rarer. Then there were his injury problems, particularly with his knees, which were to trouble him in his subsequent spells with Derby County and Southampton. Charlie George had just 169 games in 6 seasons for the Gunners, his flaws finally burying his genius. I thought he did pretty well at Derby, that's my recollection anyway, not so great at Southampton. Alan Ball, meanwhile, had been strongly linked with Manchester City in the summer, and it was obvious he was losing heart with the Arsenal cause. His discontent led to a transfer request, and he was dropped for the opening games of the 75-76 season, with Eddie Kelly taking over the captaincy. The usual early season confidence proved fragile, and once the team was beaten at home by Stoke in the third game of the season, all the tension and bickering returned. Alan Ball was brought back, and although Arsenal were desperately in need of his ability and experience, this had an adverse effect on Eddie Kelly. The players instinctively looked to Alan Ball for leadership, a situation Eddie Kelly could not accept. He had welcomed the captaincy as the stimulus needed to revive his faltering career. But within a year, sorry about this, my headphones keep slipping off. But within a year, his love affair with Arsenal was over, and he moved to join Frank McClintock at QPR, and was later to play under his managership at Leicester. I think Steve Stammers really rated Eddie Kelly. I thought he was a solid player, but not amazing, and Alan Ball was an incredible player. That's my view anyway, for what it's worth. By November, the team had been knocked out of the League Cup at home by Everton and were 4 places off the bottom of the league. And at that time, I think we were really considering relegation was more, I wouldn't say lightly, but it was something to be averted at all costs. It was proving a real baptism of fire for 2 young Dubliners, Frank Stapleton, who was proving a brave and capable partner for John Radford, and David O'Leary, a fine footballing defender who had the stamp of real class about him. When Wolves gave the Gunners a proper beating in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, all that lay ahead was another relegation battle, and the fans had long run out of patience with the team and the manager. But for all the criticism, nobody threw in the towel until March. With the pressure really on, Peter Storey walked out for 10 days and was suspended by the club. Peter Storey, with the reputation of being one of the hardest men in English football, but good enough to be a key member of the double side and an England player 19 times, could not take his or the club's decline any longer. He was not cut out to be a reserve team player, and he had run into well-publicised troubles off the field. Then came the real bombshell. Bertie Mee, soon after making a morale-boosting speech to the troops, described afterwards by Liam Brady as being of Churchillian proportions. I wonder what he knew about Churchill at the time. Announced in tears to a stunned press conference that he would retire at the end of the season. It was the first time, apart from a rare flash of temper, that Fleet Street had seen a show of emotion from this polite and reserved man. It had been clear to the club and players for some time that he had lost his appetite for the fray, and the pressure of 10 years and one of the hardest jobs in football had finally got to him. Bertie Mee had been greatly influenced by his friend Bill Nicholson, the other double-winning manager of the modern game, and one of the truly great figures of English football. The Tottenham boss had retired 2 years earlier when all the enjoyment had gone for him, and Bertie Mee promised himself he would do the same thing if he ever woke up in the morning with that same feeling. Retirement allowed him the honourable way out. There were suggestions he might stay on to advise his successor, even to become a director, but he decided it was best to leave the way clear for a new man, and he didn't make the same mistake that Manchester United did with Matt Busby. Obviously, Matt Busby, when he retired, all the managers that seemed to follow really lived in his shadow. And you have to fear something might happen to Arsenal with Arsene Wenger if he stays at the club in a backroom capacity. Anyway, Bertie Mee needed to break from the game, and eventually was to lend his vast experience successfully to Graham Taylor as general manager at Watford and help them complete their rise from 3rd to 1st Division. He was eventually to retire in 1986. It would have been a tragedy if Arsenal, ever present in the 1st Division since 1919, had lost their place at the end of the Bertie Mee era. They had a narrow squeak with the key game coming at Highbury, with the 17th placed Gunners facing Wolves in 19th. Mancini's one and only first team goal won the day. Oh, do I remember that or not? I'm not too sure. Terry Mancini, of course. Terry Mancini's goal won the day. Arsenal stayed up, despite losing their last 3 games, and Wolves went down. Survival, even if it was in 17th place and their lowest position since Chapman's arrival in 1925, did allow Bertie Mee to retire to the Highbury Hall of Fame alongside Allison and Whittaker. He had led them to the coveted double and the 5 cup finals, including the Fairs Cup win, which remains Arsenal's only European... Oh, not now. We've got European trophies since then. Well, only one, right? But these were the only fruits of his work. He had restored pride, passion, and power to the jaded giant of English football. I like that alliteration. More importantly, for the future, he had laid the foundations, even in those few difficult seasons, for the side who would be chasing the big prizes before the decade was out, and at their best would be favourably compared with the double team. In the 3 months it took Arsenal to find a successor to Bertie Mee, the speculation became intense, and most of the top names in English football at the time found their way into the hat. And now I'm approaching the quiz question, which was, of course, who was the Yugoslav? The Yugoslav that was linked heavily with the job that Bertie Mee had vacated. Who was it? And he wasn't managing the Yugoslav team at that time. He might have at some other time, I can't remember. I'm being honest with you. I should say, yeah, I know it all. I do, honest. Anyway, these were the names in the hat. Brian Clough, good name. Jack Charlton, also a good name. Wales manager Mike Smith, not so keen. And Bolton's Ian Greaves. I wouldn't have been so keen on that. The dressing room, or rather some key figures within it, had their own contender, and a lobby led by Alan Ball, George Armstrong and Terry Mancini pushed for Bobby Campbell to be promoted. But ironically, I thought that was going to happen too at the time. But ironically, the search, which took the club across the breadth of Europe, was to end almost at their back door. Although English coaches have worked around the world with success and in fact established the game in many countries, the domestic game has always had an insular streak, which the Hungarian lesson in 1953 never really cured. Of course, that's when England got smashed by the Hungarians in an international. So when it was discovered that Arsenal were attempting to prize away the celebrated Yugoslav Miljanic from Real Madrid, that's the answer to the question, Miljanic, from, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Real Madrid, the game waited eagerly to see if the mould would be broken. Miljanic had made his name with Red Star Belgrade and guided the Yugoslavs to the 1974 World Cup finals in West Germany. His teams were noted for their technical attacking brilliance. See, good job I didn't say, I made sure that I didn't say he never managed the Yugoslav national team. I had a sneaking feeling he might have done. Anyway, Arsenal were confident. They represented a tempting challenge, but it was not to be, and there were strong suspicions that I can't say his name all of a sudden, Miljanic used the Arsenal bid to improve his contract with Real Madrid. When Terry Venables, fast gaining his reputation as England's best young manager, turned Arsenal down because of his loyalty to Crystal Palace, Chairman Dennis Hillwood turned to a Highbury old boy who had always had his respect and was already a first division manager. I think you know who that man was. But I'll leave it there for now before I trip up over any more of this reading or any other words for that matter. So I think I'll give myself a red card for that reading. Pretty bad. But anyway, till the next time, up the Gunners.